My mom's sister, Cindy, is an absolute disaster. A mess. She's getting a monthly stipend from my parents just so she can survive because she's never had a job. And you will not believe what she decides to do when it comes to marriage. Sit back because this one is a wild ride. My mom's always talked about how she and Aunt Cindy suffered while they were growing up, probably to create a sense of value in me. She and her sister, Aunt Cindy, had been orphaned early on in life. Mother was 17 while her sister was just 10 years of age. Life at the orphanage was not great, and my mother got out in less than a year when she turned 18. My mother got a job so she could fend for herself and save up enough to get her sister out of that orphanage because she knew that, well, what Aunt Cindy was going through there. My mother finally got settled and had her sister come live with her. They both began struggling to make ends meet, but while my mother made plans of furthering her education by going to college, her sister did not wish to do further. My mother got into college and worked while she studied. Getting into college meant she took her eyes off of her sister, and that was how Aunt Cindy began getting exposed to life. My mother graduated from college as a pharmacist, and she bumped into my father while working at a drugstore. They dated for a while before they got married. My father was from a rich home, and he was the sole heir to their family business, so getting married to my mother elevated her status for good. My mother did not abandon her sister. She discussed it with my father, and they invited my aunt to come live with us. But my aunt refused. She would rather ask for money to get an apartment. My parents obliged and even gave her money every month. They kept my Aunt Cindy close to the family. I finally got in the picture, and I got close to my Aunt Cindy. I would prefer spending my holidays with her over staying at my parents' mansion. Aunt Cindy was really fun to be with, and most of all, most of my memory childhood moments were created from the time I spent with her. I believe my parents and my aunt both contributed to that kind of lady I'm becoming. While my parents provided the strictness required in grooming of a child, my aunt gave me the degree of freedom and exposure which every child needs to end up not a recluse. As time went by, my father got weary of giving my aunt money every single month. This was not because he was a stingy man or who hated my aunt. It was because he knew it was the best to teach an individual how to fish rather than give him or her a fish. Having my aunt depend on the generosity of his wife was not the best. He wanted her to be more independent, so he began suggesting to Aunt Cindy to come work at the family firm, where she would be paid just like other graduates, though she stopped at the high school level. My aunt did not welcome the idea of working in my dad's family business. Her excuse was she was trying to set up a business of her own, so she wanted to be an entrepreneur. My dad did not initially push the whole matter. He just kept on giving her the monthly stipend. But my aunt soon became demanding. She began calling several times a month to ask for money even after getting the usual money. My father gets fed up. Though he was from a rich background, he was never trained to be dependent on the family's wealth. Not even his only child was permitted to be lazy. He and my mom had set up a trust fund for me, but I was not to profit from it till I turned 18 years of age. And even at that, there were conditions that I needed to meet. He talked to my mom about his desire to stop giving Aunt Cindy the usual allowance, but my mother pleaded with him even though she was not really in support of Aunt Cindy being dependent on them. She asked my dad to give her a little time to talk to her sister. My mother tried making Aunt Cindy see for the millionth time how the opportunity my father was giving to her was one that the most people would die for. Aunt Cindy still refused. She maintained her grounds on the fact that she wanted, quote, to build her empire. Someone who has no work, no source of funds that we knew of besides the monthly allowance she was given, was talking about building something that would last for generations. She asked that my parents just gave her a little more time to put things together. My father had run out of patience, but he did not react in my aunt's presence. He kept quiet about the whole thing even after she left, and his silence was not good. And seeing that she came back barely 5 days later with a request that my parents fund her, quote, business trip, it was really fun because she could not produce the business plan. It was clear to my parents that the whole thing was a sham when her business meeting was guessed where? In the Bahamas. It was probably a weekend getaway with her friends. This was her usual excuse each time she wanted to get a huge sum of money. She would act as though she had this awesome business idea that could set her up for life. But the moment my parents gave her the money, she would just disappear for a few days, only to reemerge with stories of how it all failed. My parents had become used to her tricks and tactics, so my dad vehemently told her that he was not going to fund a business that lacked a plan. And Cindy stormed out of our house that day in anger, and though my parents found that disrespectful, they overlooked her. And, well, Cindy went AWOL for about 3 weeks before resurfacing out of the blue to introduce me and my parents to her lover. She did not call to inform us of her coming. She just took us by surprise. My parents and I were all watching a movie in the lounge when she walked in through the door with her lover trailing behind. I did not think it to be her lover at first because I knew she already had someone by the name of Greg, who she loved. My parents both did very well in welcoming Aunt Cindy and her lover, but we all failed in hiding our shock when she announced to us that we were in love and were engaged to get married. It was good news that my aunt had finally seen someone who had her interest in getting married to her. But the situation of the whole thing just seemed, off. Her lover was rich widower who was older than her by 35 years, and that's a mile. There was no way Aunt Cindy was in love with this man. I believe that the only thing that may have attracted my aunt to him was his money. Because if it were physical looks, then he seriously fell short. My parents shared the same view, but they didn't voice it out loud. This was something my mother planned to discuss with her later, and she finally did. My mother later sent for her Aunt Cindy and specifically asked that she came alone. Mom tried asking her if she was genuinely in love with her said lover, and Mom just wanted to make sure her sister was not getting married out of desperation because time was not on her side. Quote, "My baby and I are madly in love," was the first thing Aunt Cindy said. She claimed it was pure love between her and a man old enough to be her father. Mom asked her if she had counted the cost, and this man had grown-up children who were mates, and he may likely not want another child at his age. This would see my aunt going through life without her ever having kids of her own. Aunt Cindy concurred that Mom was right. She had discussed it with her lover, who told her he was not willing to have any more children, and Aunt Cindy said she was okay with it. Quote, "All that matters is the love and bond we share. Kids are not a must," she included. Mom could not do or say anything to make Aunt Cindy change her mind, so she let her be. It was clear her sister did not want to hear any discouraging words. The marriage between Aunt Cindy and her, quote, baby finally happened. We were all present at the event, even though we were not in support of it. There was nothing we could do. If she was happy, then we just had to be happy with her. The marriage ceremony, which was a lavish one, finally came to an end, and Aunt Cindy and her husband now went on vacation in the Bahamas. She'd finally found someone to sponsor her trips there. Most of those who knew about or attended the wedding thought that Aunt Cindy was a gold digger. Her love for her husband was indeed questionable. I I doubt she would be getting married to him if he was a poor and wretched, but it was nobody's business. Aunt Cindy came back 3 weeks later and paid us a visit in her new Range Rover SUV, which was a wedding gift to her from her husband. She had come to thank my parents for the love and support which they had shown her all throughout the years, and especially for standing by her side throughout the wedding event. All of that was trash. We knew she just wanted to show off her car. Before leaving, she asked me to come visit her anytime I could. My parents wished her well, and my father was most grateful Aunt Cindy was now out of his hair. She could drain her rich husband millions into her imaginary empire. Aunt Cindy was supposed to be living her best life, and we did not expect to hear news of her impending divorce. Just 6 months later, my parents got to know about it when my mom called just to check up on her sister. Aunt Cindy did not speak much on the phone. She only told my mom that she was living apart from her husband, but promised to tell us more about the issue when she came. Aunt Cindy came to our house the next day and told my parents she had made the mistake of getting married to her husband in the first place. This same lady who was at our house 6 months earlier professing her love for her old husband, whom she called baby, now came back to our house to tell us how they were never meant to be. It seems her baby had suddenly grown up in less than a year. So, my mother inquired if she was, abused in any way, but my aunt simply said that she was pushing for a divorce as a result of irreconcilable differences. My parents were not willing to meddle in the affairs. If she felt divorce was the way she needed to go, then it was her business. Before leaving our house that day, Aunt Cindy turned to me and asked me to marry right whenever I want to settle down. What we all found amusing was the fact that despite pushing for a divorce from her grown-up baby, she still drove that SUV which he gifted her with pride. My aunt's divorce was a quiet one. Her stepchildren, who were her age, some even older than her, wanted to drag her through a serious legal battle as their suspicions about her being a gold digger was playing out. They had initially tried discouraging their father from getting married to her, but decided to let the marriage stand because they knew their father needs a companion. They demanded my aunt return the car gifted to her by their father, since she's no longer interested in a marriage that was not even 7 months old. Aunt Cindy bluntly refused. She threatened to make a public scene about the whole thing if they did not get off her back. Her widowed ex-husband just let her be. He did not want to be in the media for controversial reasons, and Aunt Cindy lived quietly for a year before getting married to some other person. Her second marriage was a business mogul who was 25 years her senior, and he was a widower too. My parents could not ignore the pattern. Why must all the men who my aunt decided to settle down with be rich widowers? The ugly part of it was that my aunt would always claim that it was where her heart led her. Her heart must be one greedy heart, as it only led her to rich people. Aunt Cindy was using her beauty to enrich herself. What an entrepreneur she was! I recently graduated from college, and I turned down the request by my parents to work for the family. I didn't fancy working for my parents, so I don't want any form of favoritism at work. Besides, I'm trying to avoid a scenario in the future where someone would allude to my success in life with my parents. Well, my parents were initially scared when I told them that I wanted to start my own business after I must have saved up enough capital from my current job. They thought my aunt's mentality was trying to rub off on me, but that's not even possible. I would never get to the point where I have to sell my body to older men for money. One thing I can't deny is my love for Aunt Cindy. But some other thing I'm certain of is that my lifestyle would not take after hers. My parents offered to help fund the business idea, but I declined their offer after thanking them though. I, however, made them understand that the business empire, which looked nothing like that of my Aunt Cindy, that I would build would be my efforts alone. I know it wouldn't be easy, nothing good ever is, but I'm willing to pay the prices to see my dream come true. Update number 1. The drama of my Aunt Cindy marrying and divorcing rich old men in less than a year has once again played out. Yeah, she recently divorced her second husband as soon as my mother heard the news of her sister's second divorce. She knew she had to do something. We all loved Aunt Cindy dearly, but her track record of marrying rich old men and divorcing them just a few months later was causing quite a stir in our society. People were starting to see her as nothing more than a gold digger, and we couldn't bear that thought of being viewed in such a negative light. My mother decided after 5 months, when the dust from the divorce had settled, to visit her and have this little heart-to-heart with her about her choices. I guess she just wanted her to understand that her actions were affecting not only her reputation, but also the way people saw our family. Mother hoped that by speaking to her, she could convince her to straighten up her life and make better decisions. I accompanied my mother to Aunt Cindy's place, and when we arrived at her house, she welcomed us with open arms. However, as soon as my mother broached the topic of her marriage, she became defensive. She accused my mother of judging her and of not understanding the struggles that she's gone through. She claimed that if my parents had helped her financially, she wouldn't have to resort to marrying old men. I sat quietly observing the whole thing, and well, she was just looking for excuses to carry on with her life of harlotry without being reprimanded. She could all as well go out naked into the street with a placard that read, "Body open for business." My mother tried to explain to her that money wasn't everything and that happiness could not be bought. She reminded her of the time she and Dad had offered her help, but she had refused, preferring to take the easy way out. But Aunt Cindy was not having any of it. As we were about to take our leave, she dropped the bombshell that she was engaged again, and used the opportunity to invite us to her engagement party in 2 weeks' time. She was actually flaunting a diamond ring. We were shocked and disappointed, to say the least. I could not understand how she could be so frivolous with her life and her heart. It was wrong to get into a relationship after getting off of one, but it would have been manageable if that was just the case. My aunt was getting engaged to Mr. Anderson. He was a popular man in the area, and my parents once did business with him in the past. He recently turned 80 years old. He was the oldest among the old men my aunt had dated, and I wanted to shake some sense into her. But I knew it wouldn't do any good. If everyone had tried and failed, I would not succeed in making her see a reason to. As we left her house, I could not help but worry about her future. I knew that she was making a huge mistake by getting engaged so quickly after her divorce. But I also knew that she was a grown woman and had to make her own choices. All I could do was hope and pray that she would find the happiness she was searching for, and it would not come at a great cost. All the same, I would attend her engagement party out of respect and nothing more. Update number 2. I was not happy my parents refused to attend Aunt Cindy's engagement party. I mean, I understood their reasons. They didn't approve of her marrying a rich man and divorcing him after, but it was still a family member's party. I was a bit disappointed that they were letting their disapproval come in a way of their relationship with Aunt Cindy through, on the other hand, I understood that they didn't want to support their relation getting married to their longtime business partner when, well, they knew she would mess the whole thing up at the end of the day. I didn't share the same views with them this time around. I've known Aunt Cindy for some time now, and I feel indebted to her in some way. At first, my parents forbade me from attending the party, but I begged and pleaded with them to let me go. They eventually gave in, but with strict instructions to not cause any drama and to leave early. I got to the party and saw my aunt's longtime boyfriend, Greg. I asked myself why my aunt would always invite her ex, if they were even separated, to all her engagement parties. I kept my thoughts and questions to myself. I'd been warned by my parents to not cause a drama, and besides, it's none of my business. The party was going well until Aunt Cindy and I started talking about my job. I told her that I was a data analyst and was saving up to start my firm soon. That's when things went downhill fast. Aunt Cindy starts to make fun of my parents in front of everyone, saying how they were always judging her and making her feel unworthy. With the way my aunt spoke about them, a stranger could think that they were the most wicked people walking the face of the earth. I tried to stop her, telling her that it wasn't fair to talk about my parents like that, but she wouldn't listen. Instead, she attacked me too, calling me a trust fund baby who could not amount to anything without my parents' help. I was so embarrassed and humiliated that I ran out of the party. How could my aunt infer that my success so far came from my parents' money when I had rejected working for the company and even turned down their offer to fund my business? I admit the trust fund which they set up for me has been of help, but what was wrong with parents setting their children up for success? I went home that day but could not face my parents, knowing that they were right about Aunt Cindy all along. I decided not to tell them what happened, as they would only blame me for going to Aunt Cindy's third engagement party to a rich man in less than 3 years' time. From that day on, I knew that the relationship between Aunt Cindy and me would never be the same again. She had shown how bitter her heart was towards my parents, and I could not forgive her for that. I now realize that sometimes family relationships can be complicated and messy, and sometimes it's best to let go of the toxic ones, even if they are with family members or not. I would cut off my aunt, but that would be after I must have made her pay for the embarrassment she made me face at her engagement. Update number 3. Wow, I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. One where I would be intentional about ruining my aunt's life. I guess it's because the insults she threw at my parents and I during her party were too much for me to bear. They're still ignorant about what had transpired at the party. I don't see the need to tell them, as I'm getting revenge for the whole of us. I stood in front of my aunt's 80-year-old fiancé, Mr. Anderson, at his office, telling him my suspicions about my aunt still being involved with her longtime lover, Greg. Mr. Anderson looked at me skeptically, probably wondering why a young girl like me was meddling in the affairs of seniors. But as I recounted my aunt's past escapades of marrying rich old men and divorcing them just a mere months later, I could see the shock on his face. I informed him that his lover was my mother's junior sister, and before he could ask who my parents were, I called our family name. The moment he had our family name, he began taking my words more seriously. I brought to his notice that the fact that my parents did not attend the party simply because they were not sure if my aunt loved him. I asked him, "Go ahead, pull the CCTV footage from his engagement party," and when he did, I pointed out that Greg was there as Aunt Cindy's longtime lover. Thankfully, he thanked me for bringing it to his attention and promised to investigate the matter himself. So at this point, I left his office, feeling relieved that I've done my part, and hoped that it was going to be enough to cause my aunt the kind of pain which she's never felt in her life before. Days went by, and I did not hear from Mr. Anderson. I wondered if he found out anything or if he's decided to ignore my claims. I later found out that he confronted her about their alleged affair. My aunt denied it, of course, but then in a shocking turn of events, she announced that she was 2 weeks pregnant with his child. Guys, my jaw absolutely dropped. I couldn't believe it. My aunt was carrying the child of a man who was older than her father. This was the first of its kind. My aunt, well, she never got pregnant for her lovers, and it made my parents and I wondered what card she was playing this time around. Could she be pregnant for Mr. Anderson? Well, only time will tell, right? Mr. Anderson has been carried away by the news of impending fatherhood that he forgot all about the cheating allegations. He decided to get married to my aunt once the child was born. I'm shocked at how stupid an individual can get indeed. Gray hair is no sign of wisdom at all. How can one be prepared to get married to a woman that's been accused of getting married to older folks for gains? How could Mr. Anderson throw my warnings up into the wind just like that? My aunt has seen him wrapped around her fingers. It seems my plan to get back at my aunt has deeply failed. I still believe in karma all the same, and I hope she gets what she deserves in the future. Update number 4. It's been like a year since I last updated. I'm glad because karma's finally caught up with my aunt. After she's taken her husband's attention off the cheating allegations, she went on to hold a baby shower party where she revealed the gender of her child to be a boy. Her fiancé showered her with gifts to the point that she began acquiring properties here and there. She had cut off herself from my parents and I at this point, but we could still see her Facebook postings, where she flaunted all her new stuff and called out haters. My parents and I, of course, made the list. Well, she would post a car and suddenly start giving a motivational speech to her followers. Her speech was either, "Blood is not always family," or "They talk behind you because you're ahead of them." It was just so cringy. She gave birth to a bouncing baby boy and requested her fiancé let her go on a 3-week vacation with her child, so she could relax before the wedding date arrives. Her fiancé, Mr. Anderson, agrees. The day when my sister was supposed to make her journey finally came and she headed to the airport. Her husband suddenly went after her in a shocking turn of events. Unknown to her, he had secretly carried out a DNA test at the hospital where his alleged son was born, and the results had come back while my aunt was on her way to the airport. The old man wasn't stupid after all. He only played calm till he had his facts in a line. My aunt was about to board the plane when the police intercepted her and had her arrested. Mr. Anderson could recognize a familiar face with her. It was Greg. He had both of them arrested and immediately collected the diamond ring which he had been used to proposing to Aunt Cindy. I can't express how glad I am that karma finally came through. Though my parents are not vocalizing their happiness, I'm certain that they're satisfied my aunt's plot had failed this time around. My aunt and her lover Greg are currently detained at the police station, and a sample from his body has been taken to the lab, where a DNA test would be run to ascertain the paternity of the child. Update number 5, final update of the story. The DNA results came out and it showed Greg was the father of Aunt Cindy's child. Mr. Anderson was not going to let them off the hook so easily. He had them checked out and results were devastating. Aunt Cindy and Greg had been longtime lovers who preyed on innocent rich old men. Greg would spot these men and Aunt Cindy would get them to fall for her. Once they were married, she would find a reason to divorce them and leave with her pockets full. It was discovered that they had an offshore account that contained, well, millions. Aunt Cindy had become worried when Mr. Anderson began asking questions about her cheating on him, and she asked to go on a vacation with her son just to escape from the country. She planned to leave with Greg and they would start a new life with their son. They would have succeeded if the DNA result did not come when it did. Mr. Anderson had the authorities charge them to court, and my parents followed the progress of things but remained quiet. They didn't want to be associated with my aunt who was going down for good. They were serious about not being linked with Aunt Cindy, and they showed this by deciding to not be present on the day of her and her lover's trial. Mr. Anderson, however, appealed to the court to bring me in as a witness. And that was how my parents learned of my involvement in the case. I explained everything that happened, from the insults received at her engagement party down to me calling Mr. Anderson's attention to what was going on under his nose. My parents and I had to show up in court, and my aunt's eyes opened wide when she saw me take the witness stand to testify against her. I told the court all I knew. Aunt Cindy and her lover were both sentenced to 7 years in prison, and the wealth which they had amassed so far was forfeited. It was going to be used to compensate their victims. The news of my aunt's sentencing went viral, and my parents made a video to the public where they condemned my aunt's actions and commended the law for upholding justice. Their video helped save the face of the family business. It's a pity, though I don't pity anybody, how Aunt Cindy's life is taking such a negative direction. Her image has been marred, and by the time she will be getting out of prison, it'll be difficult, if not impossible, to resume her usual trade. Getting an honest job would equally be a challenge. My parents took my aunt's son under their care, and though his mother had behaved badly, I'm glad my parents are not letting him suffer because of this lifestyle of his mother. I would soon be starting my own business in just a few months' time, and I'm currently dating somebody. Thankfully, my fiancé is not as old as my father or his father. Everything's going well for me, and well, I'm positive the future will be better. Not going to lie, at what point does Cindy think she's going to get away with this? I mean, this is now the third husband, and this guy was over 80 years of age. Obviously, it was a huge red flag from the get-go, but that did not stop OP from getting to the bottom of this. Guys, I have one question for you. If you were in OP's position, would you get involved in this? Would you meddle in the middle of these affairs? Let me know your answer. Drop it down below in the comment section. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, the best way, hands down, to support the channel is simple. All you have to do is click that subscribe button. I'm here every single day reading stories. You can find me on my other channels as well, which are in my profile or down below in the description section. Have an amazing day, and I will see you tomorrow.